At 4:17 a.m. Eastern Ukraine, a single FPV drone lifts off from a concealed dugout. Cost roughly $400. Range 15 miles. Time to target under 4 minutes. On the other side of the front, a mechanized column advances at 150 to 400 feet per day, slower than World War I offensives a century ago. The equipment rolling forward is worth millions per unit. Tanks, armored vehicles, logistics trucks, each one tracked, each one visible, each one inside a zone no map can clearly define. Between 2023 and 2025, Russia gained just 1.45% of Ukraine's territory. In the same period, losses mounted into the hundreds of thousands, alongside more than 16,000 armored systems rendered unusable, according to aggregated estimates cited by major defense outlets. The financial toll climbed so sharply that Moscow announced military budget cuts for 2026, a first in over a decade, during an active war. This is not a story about a breakthrough weapon. It is not about a miracle system. It is about something far more unsettling. A battlefield where there is no safe rear. A front line that stretches 20 kilometers deep. A war where a cheap drone outpaces a $3 million tank. Military planners once believed mass and momentum would decide this conflict. Instead, time became the enemy. Every advance slowed. Every push triggered instant response. Every concentration turned into exposure. And then the unthinkable happened. The side that started with fewer resources began forcing the larger power to fight on its terms. Economically, technologically, psychologically. What emerged was not a line of trenches, but an invisible machine. Adaptive, distributed, relentless. This is the story of the one thing Russia never accounted for, and why the battlefield itself has turned against them. To understand why this war changed direction, it is necessary to step back. This conflict is not simply Russia versus Ukraine. It is mass versus speed, centralization versus adaptation, industrial-era warfare versus networked combat. When Russian forces crossed the border in February 2022, the assumption was familiar. Overmatch in artillery, numerical superiority, depth of reserves, a defense industry designed for prolonged attrition. Moscow entered the war with roughly 900,000 active personnel, thousands of tanks, and the expectation that territory could be seized faster than it could be defended. Ukraine faced the opposite reality. A smaller force, limited heavy equipment, an economy 1/10 the size. Yet by 2023, the logic of the battlefield began to fracture. Traditional doctrine treats the front line as a narrow band. Behind it lies safety, logistics, command. That assumption no longer held. Cheap drones extended surveillance and strike capability 15 to 25 miles beyond the contact line. A battalion could no longer hide. A supply truck could no longer move unseen. A command post could no longer remain static. The contrast was brutal. A Russian tank cost $3 to $4 million. A Ukrainian FPV drone cost $300 to $500. One required months to produce. The other could be assembled in days. Historically, wars rewarded scale. World War I favored massed infantry. World War II favored combined arms and air power. The Cold War emphasized layered defenses and armored maneuver. This conflict broke that pattern. By late 2024, analysts at Reuters, BBC, and Defense News noted a growing asymmetry. Russia could still generate firepower, but converting that power into movement became increasingly difficult. Every advance triggered surveillance. Every pause invited precision strikes. What emerged was not a static defense. It was a system. Ukraine shifted away from holding ground at all costs. Instead, it focused on denying momentum. The goal was not to stop attacks outright, but to slow them, expose them, and make them unsustainable. This strategy inverted traditional strength. The side with fewer resources forced the wealthier opponent to spend more for less. Each kilometer gained came at rising cost. Each offensive cycle delivered diminishing returns. By 2025, the war was no longer about who had more equipment. It was about who could adapt faster. And that difference reshaped everything that followed. The shift did not happen overnight. It unfolded in layers. In early 2023, Russian units pushed forward using familiar patterns. Artillery preparation, armor concentration, infantry waves. On paper, the numbers looked decisive. In reality, every step forward entered a widening detection envelope. Commercial quadcopters appeared first, then FPV drones, then loitering munitions, then fiber optic systems immune to jamming. By mid-2024, the engagement zone stretched 3 to 5 miles beyond the front. By late 2025, it reached 20 to 25 kilometers in some sectors, according to assessments cited by Jane's Defense Weekly. The battlefield no longer had a clear edge, it became a volume. Russian columns moving at night were tracked by thermal optics. Units dispersing during the day were identified by persistent overhead surveillance. Attempts to mass armor triggered rapid counterfires within minutes. The first unexpected twist came with dispersion. Ukraine abandoned large defensive positions. Platoon-sized bunkers vanished. In their place appeared hundreds of micro-positions, often 1 or 2 operators, sometimes only a drone relay. Each cell connected digitally, each capable of calling strikes across wide areas. There was no headquarters to disable, no single node to neutralize. The second twist followed quickly. Russia adapted with electronic warfare. Jammers flooded the spectrum. Radio-controlled drones dropped out of the sky. For several weeks, momentum appeared to shift. Then fiber optic drones entered the field. Tethered by ultra-thin cable, these systems ignored jamming entirely. Video feeds remained stable until impact. Ukrainian engineers studied captured examples, redesigned the spools, reduced drag, and extended range. By summer 2024, Ukrainian variants exceeded 15 miles, according to reporting from Defense News. The third twist was mobility. Instead of holding ground, Ukrainian units allowed limited penetration. Russian forces advanced into pre-surveyed corridors. Obstacles slowed movement. Mines redirected armor. Wire entanglements forced infantry into predictable paths. Every delay increased exposure time. From above, drones hovered. From behind, logistics convoys stalled. From the flanks, strikes arrived without warning. By 2025, even resupply became hazardous. Rail lines 20 kilometers behind the front were targeted. Trucks moved only in short bursts. Fuel consumption rose. Maintenance cycles shortened. Operational tempo collapsed. Then came the most disruptive escalation. Unmanned ground systems entered combat roles. By late 2024, Ukraine deployed robotic platforms capable of hauling 600+ pounds, delivering supplies, placing mines, or carrying remote weapons. In December 2024, Ukrainian forces conducted a fully unmanned assault using only drones and ground robots, confirmed by multiple European defense observers. Human presence receded, machines advanced. When equipment was lost, replacement followed quickly. When a robot failed, operators remained untouched. The arithmetic changed. Attrition no longer scaled symmetrically. Russia continued pushing, but each push produced less. Each month cost more. What looked like incremental progress was masking a deeper collapse in efficiency. By 2025, the consequences were no longer confined to the battlefield. They spread outward, into budgets, into factories, into society. Russia's military economy began to strain under its own weight. According to reporting by Reuters and BBC, defense spending reached nearly 40% of federal expenditure in 2025, levels unseen since the Cold War. Yet output failed to translate into operational success. Tanks produced could not move freely. Artillery shells stockpiled could not be delivered safely. Even basic logistics absorbed rising resources just to maintain current positions. The financial math turned unforgiving. A single advanced missile interceptor could cost $3 to $4 million. The drone it targeted cost under $1,000. The exchange rate favored the defender. Russian armored losses surpassed 16,000 vehicles since 2022, according to open-source tallies cited by Defense News and DW. Replacement cycles stretched, maintenance backlogs grew, training pipelines shortened. By mid-2025, Moscow acknowledged the need to reduce projected military spending for 2026, an extraordinary admission during an ongoing war. This pressure reached society. Mobilization pools thinned, recruitment incentives rose sharply, regional budgets were redirected, industrial labor shortages emerged as skilled workers shifted into defense plants or exited the workforce entirely. Export revenue from arms sales collapsed as nearly all production remained domestically consumed. Ukraine's situation differed sharply. While under constant pressure, Kyiv shifted investment towards scalability. Instead of producing a few exquisite systems, it produced many adaptable ones. By late 2025, Ukrainian officials reported the capacity to assemble over 5 million drones annually, drawing on a network of 200+ private firms, according to Reuters and Jane's. This ecosystem shortened feedback loops. Operators sent battlefield data directly to engineers. Designs changed weekly. Failures became upgrades. What once took years in traditional procurement cycles now took days. The human impact followed a different trajectory as well. With unmanned systems taking on logistics, reconnaissance, and assault roles, exposure decreased. Rotations lengthened. Operational endurance improved. The focus shifted from holding terrain to preserving force effectiveness. Militarily, the result was strategic denial. Russia could still apply pressure, but pressure no longer yielded momentum. Economically, the burden compounded. Each offensive cycle consumed fuel, equipment, and manpower without proportional gain. Each delay increased cost. Each pause allowed Ukraine to reinforce the system. Strategists at Jane's Defense Weekly described it as a negative return conflict. The more Russia invested, the less it gained. The longer it continued, the more the imbalance widened. This was not collapse in dramatic form, it was erosion, slow, measurable, persistent, and it forced a reassessment far beyond the front lines. What began on the plains of eastern Ukraine did not stay there. By 2025, military planners from Washington to Beijing were watching closely, not for headlines, for lessons. For NATO, the implications were immediate. Decades of doctrine rested on air dominance, precision strikes, and expensive platforms. Fighter jets costing $80 to $100 million. Missile systems priced in the millions per launch. Ukraine demonstrated a different equation. Swarms of cheap drones could saturate defenses. Persistence could replace penetration. Speed of iteration could outweigh technological perfection. Officials cited by Reuters and Defense News confirmed that NATO states quietly adjusted procurement priorities. Britain accelerated production of interceptor drones developed with Ukrainian input. Poland expanded anti-drone training programs after repeated airspace incidents. Romania announced joint drone manufacturing ventures with Ukrainian firms for domestic use and export. The United States took notice as well, despite retaining unmatched global capabilities. Pentagon assessments acknowledged a gap. Traditional acquisition cycles moved too slowly. Systems designed over 10 to 15 years struggled against adversaries iterating in weeks. Reports from Defense News indicated ongoing talks to integrate Ukrainian battlefield-tested drone technologies into US programs, not as replacements but as complements. China observed from a different angle. Analysts at DW and Jane's noted Chinese military journals increasingly discussed Ukraine-style defense concepts, cheap unmanned systems, civil-military integration, rapid prototyping. For Beijing, the relevance extended to Taiwan scenarios where denial and attrition matter more than outright dominance. In the Middle East, lessons traveled fast. Israel studied robotic logistics and urban drone use. Gulf states reassessed air defense economics. Even non-state actors adapted concepts at smaller scales, forcing regional militaries to rethink perimeter security. 3 scenarios emerge for the next 3 to 6 months. In the first, Russia pushes for a freeze, not victory, but pause, a line drawn to preserve remaining capability. Analysts at Reuters described growing diplomatic signals aligned with this logic. In the second, escalation through adaptation, increased drone production, expanded electronic warfare, attempts to overwhelm rather than outmaneuver, costly, uncertain. In the third, long war normalization, a conflict managed rather than resolved, attrition absorbed into budgets, innovation races continuing under pressure. Across all scenarios, one conclusion hardened. The age of uncontested rear areas is over. The distinction between front and rear has collapsed. Every modern battlefield is transparent. Ukraine's experience rewrote assumptions. Smaller states could deny larger powers. Private industry could outpace state monopolies. Adaptation speed became a strategic asset. For allies and adversaries alike, the message was clear. The future of war will not belong to those with the biggest arsenals. It will belong to those who learn fastest. And that realization is now reshaping global security thinking in real time. By the end of 2025, the battlefield told a story no doctrine predicted. Russia entered the war expecting mass to decide outcomes. Ukraine survived by turning mass into a liability. Instead of meeting force with force, it met momentum with friction. Instead of defending every meter, it defended time. Every delay amplified cost. Every adaptation widened the gap. The numbers speak quietly but clearly. Less than 2% territorial change over 2 years. Advance rates measured in feet per day. Thousands of armored systems consumed. Budget stretched toward breaking points. Yet the most powerful effect is not visible on maps. It is psychological. A battlefield where nothing can hide. A war where every movement is observed. A conflict where advantage expires quickly. Ukraine's killzone strategy is not a miracle weapon. It is a system, a fusion of cheap technology, rapid learning, and decentralized execution. It thrives on adaptation, not dominance. It rewards flexibility, not rigidity. For Russia, the challenge grows with time. Centralized control struggles to keep pace with distributed innovation. Industrial scale cannot compensate for slow feedback loops. Attrition no longer guarantees progress. For the world, the lesson is unsettling. What happens when major powers face opponents who do not seek victory through conquest, but through denial? What happens when wars become contests of endurance, innovation, and economics rather than territory? And what happens when the cost of offense always exceeds the value of gains? The answers will define the next decade of global security. Will Russia succeed in freezing the conflict before the imbalance deepens further? Will Ukraine's model scale beyond defense into strategic leverage? And will other nations adapt quickly enough before these methods spread? The battlefield has already changed. The question is, who changes with it? If this analysis reshaped how this conflict looks, share your perspective below. Subscribe for deeper breakdowns as this war continues to redefine modern